Mike Heath, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, Will.
Mike, you and a couple partners bought a very small garage door business, tripled it in about 3 years, though it hasn't been without some fetal position moments. You are now also in the pool business with another acquisition. So we're going to hear kind of a trajectory of somebody who pivoted out of real estate into business buying and is moving pretty quickly. And I think it's fair to say sees his career doing this going forward. Let's get into it, Mike. How about some background on you first, please?
Grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. It's about 30 minutes south of the city. Went to school at University of Missouri, St. Louis, studied accounting, business administration. After that, went down to Bogota, Colombia. Was supposed to be a 4-month trip, ended up turning into 3 years. Came back to St. Louis. I got into insurance. I did mortgages for a while. I liked the mortgage business, but taking phone calls till 11 o'clock at night really didn't fit the lifestyle that I wanted. Went the corporate route for about 5 years, working for a roofing manufacturer. Gave me a little bit of structure, and it was great. But I didn't really see myself climbing the ladder. I wanted a little more ownership, and then that's where the garage door company came into play. That was back in 2020, and I was still working for Malarkey Roofing Products at the time. And we ended up buying the business while I was still working for that company, but it happened during COVID. So we were working from home the majority of it. So I was doing all my sales calls in the beginning of the day, and then dealing with the garage door company whenever I had time.
Well, Mike, but tell me where real estate investing came into this, because that was what you had started doing kind of as your entrepreneurial outlet, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I was flipping houses. I had a couple buy and holds. The whole idea was that I'd flip my way to being able to buy rental properties, and it was going well. I mean, I did pretty damn well on a handful of these properties, but when you're working a 9 to 5 and then doing this on the side, and I'm making $200-$300 a door, it's just seeing the path to what everybody tries to shoot for, and this is financial freedom. It just seemed like such a long road. And that's why I started doing more of these flips. And the flips, I did a handful that were really well. And then I had one that put me in the hole. We probably lost, I lost probably about $80,000 to $100,000 on it.
Wow.
So it was a kick in the teeth. We got through it. My dad, he's a retired carpenter right now. So he, really saved my butt on that and got me through that difficult time. But
and Mike, that 80 to 100 grand that you lost on that deal, was that more than the sum of all the profits you'd earned from the previous successful deals? I mean, did it eat up everything you'd built so far? No, okay.
Not all of it, but it just definitely hurt, and it was it was discouraging for sure. But the attitude was that I made I made a couple hundred on the other properties that I had done. So I knew it was just a cost of doing business, and I made a couple mistakes, learned from them. It's a cost of the tuition, and just was ready to push forward. But the business buying, I have a friend that's a broker that had been, every time we get together, he's telling me about all these deals and talking about the people that were buying these, and most of them were executives that were retiring. They still want to stay in the game, and it just sounded really exciting. And the amount of money that they were putting into the deal was about the same amount of money that I was putting into real estate to buy these properties. And you can do it through hard money. You can do it, if you have the cash and the capital, you can always, put that in for the down payment. But it just seemed like it was the same process. And these loans were, 7 to 10 years. You could go SBA and do 25 if there's real estate attached to it. But it just seemed like there's a lot more money over here than what I'm doing with real estate. And I know that you can make a ton of money in real estate through multifamily, flipping. It just, I don't know. It was something that was new to me. And I knew the brokers, one of his friends, he's an investor and he owns probably about 150 businesses. And we were at a bar one day and I was, curious. I was asking him questions and I said, look, I'm investing in real estate and that's how I see my path of getting out of my 9 to 5. Why do you buy businesses? Because everybody tells me that these things, the failure rate is like 95%. He's like, yeah, Mike. He's
like startups, sort of
on a startup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
what does he say?
He's like, on a startup, yeah, that's true. He's like, but if you buy a business that's been around for 10, 15, 20 years, the failure rate's much less. He's like, you obviously have to do your due diligence on it to make sure all the records are straight and everything's, is what they say it is. But he's like, Mike, you can pay these things off in 3 to 5 years if you buy the right business. He's like, and think about that. He's like, you can, if you set it up properly and you get somebody to run your business, you could be making 150, 200, whatever it is, and with the same amount of money that you'd have to put into a real estate deal. He's like, that's why I buy businesses. And he's like, some of them fail. He's like, that's true. He's like, but worst case scenario, you file bankruptcy. 2 years later, you just go do the same damn thing again. So it kind of blew my mind.
Only 2 years?
That's what he said at the moment. I don't know what, after you file bankruptcy, I don't know what the period of time is to be able to build up your credit back up. But yeah, I mean, that's what he told me at the moment.
Either, but I know it's more than 2 years. But
I would imagine
still, point remains. Yeah. You can recover. It's brutal, but you can recover.
Yeah, that really changed a lot of things for me. So I started talking to the broker and I said, look, I've got sales, business development experience. I came from blue collar. I know that I can speak it. I can also do the white collar thing. But if you see something that fits what you think I can handle, please just send it my way. Janitorial business came along. I looked at that. I actually went under contract with it, LOI, and the guy he let me run his business while I was under LOI. And after doing it for about a month, we were doing commercial cleanings, TJ Maxx, stuff like that. And I just didn't want to deal with it. The type of employees that we were dealing with, the business made about 150 to 200 grand a year. It seemed good. It's just, I didn't really want to work in that space.
We'll tell people why not, because that is an appealing space on its face, at least, because it's recurring revenue. That basically it's B2B recurring revenue. You get these contracts. Why didn't you like it?
The employees that were coming in, that I had met, a lot of them were taking the bus routes. And in St. Louis, the bus system isn't really the best. Public transportation is not really the greatest. A lot of the employees were getting rides from friends and family. It just, we were doing cleanings down in Springfield, Missouri. And I remember one day the person couldn't get to work. So I had to drive all the way down to Springfield, Missouri to go do this cleaning by myself. And you had to repair all the equipment. The owner it was a small business. It was him and his wife that were running it. And I wanted something that had a little bit more of a system in place. And he always had a problem with high turnover. Yeah. It just didn't really seem like it was a good fit for me at the time. And maybe I just didn't know much about buying businesses and what you really had to deal with, because found out later that's sometimes you got to jump in and get your hands dirty. So,
but it's nocturnal as well, right? These cleanings happen during the night.
They can happen at night, sometimes early in the morning, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. They're there before the store opens up. And they're easy. I mean, it's, looking back, I would think it would have been a great business. But at the time, it just, with me working a 9 to 5 and then doing this on the side, it just didn't make much sense. Okay. So, but yeah, looking back, it probably would have worked out.
And then, Mike, so it was this conversation with your broker friend and this local guy who's bought 150 businesses, you said?
Yeah.
That opened your eyes to this. And that was, and so you're seeing this guy, this exemplar of this path, 150 businesses. So obviously that's an inspiration. So you say, so the napkin math makes sense. And here he is sitting in front of you, having done it and presumably been very successful at it. And so after that's your kind of ETA eye-opening moment, and you run after it pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure it was that was the genesis. I'll get questions from time to time about being able to work in the business first in some capacity, or a guest will have some sort of structure like that. How did you work that? You got it under LOI, and then the owner just said to you, feel free to come working? Was it compensated? Tell us more about how you were able to try before you buy.
It wasn't compensated, and I just said that I wanted to get a feel for what the business was like to see if this was a good fit for me. And the broker said, like, you're more than welcome to try to see if he'll be willing to do this. He's like, I doubt it. Most sellers do not want, a potential buyer to be working in the business. And he was fine with it, and he let me come in. And honestly, I was setting up new accounts for him. And we actually opened up 2 new accounts, or 2 new locations with TJ Maxx while I was trying this out. It was ridiculous, but he was like, yeah, just go ahead and do it. And he's like, we've got this person down in this area, and you can just tell them when they need to be there. So I was running the damn thing. I mean, I was looking for employees. I was doing everything that, an owner of a company would do, which was surprising. And then we got to the end of the due diligence period, and I told him that, I think I'm going to back away from this. This isn't a good fit for me. I think the business ended up going under because he was just done with it and he wanted to go do something else. But mistake on his part. I would never do that if we were selling a company. Because you run a risk.
Why was it a mistake? Because he checked out even further once you were in there, and he just hoped and kind of behaved as if it was going to close, and then it didn't.
Yeah, 100%. So, and he had already introduced me to the employees. Hey, this is the new manager. He's going to be, he's going to be working with you on your schedules. Contact him. I had the employment agencies calling me. I had TJ Maxx calling me, telling me that people weren't showing up after I had already told them that I'm not interested. All the accounts, he basically transferred everything over to me, like he had already sold the business. So yeah, it was a mistake on his part. I think, I'm not sure what the conversations were with the broker, but, I would imagine they advised him against it, but he was just he was just done with the business and he wanted to move on. So he was willing to let it, run in the ground, or, hopefully if everything worked out, I was going to end up buying it, but it didn't go that way.
Gotcha. Okay. Next, carry on to the next business.
All right. So Stateline came around, I think, at the beginning of 2020, and COVID was going on, and we looked at the business. So the business was for sale for $250,000. It was making $250,000 a year. The owner wasn't paying himself or his wife a salary, so they just lived off the income from the business. So it was a 1X deal. It was small. Revenue was probably about 2.5. And that was consistent, year over year. Even through COVID, they were essential workers, so he did not stop. He actually picked up. But he never got over 2.5 in revenue because he said he was happy. He's like, 250 for me and my wife is just more than enough. We don't need any more. He's like, if you want to grow this thing, he's like, all you got to do is take on the contracts. So at the time, the broker
he was retiring, Mike?
Yeah, he wanted to retire.
And so 250,000, and is in SDE, and it's being sold for 250,000. Now,
Correct.
Of course, one of the first things that we always look at in an SDE situation is what it would cost to replace this individual, and just to look at the business truly as kind of a standalone entity, and not require you being the owner operator, even if your plan is to do that for a while or indefinitely. So 250 minus what his market rate would be, and minus what his wife's market rate would be their replacement cost. What do you think that would have been if you ballpark?
I mean,
was she full time?
She only worked probably 10 hours a week.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
I'd say that we could probably get somebody for probably about $35,000 to do the books with the revenue that he was doing. And then to replace him, it would be somewhere around $80,000. So, you're looking at maybe about $150,000 net if we had to replace him. But, so my role in the thing, I had a friend that was working for a competitor, and he had reached out to me probably about 2 or 3 days before the opportunity presented itself. And, he was working for them. He was basically running all the operations. They weren't paying him what he should get paid.
Working for another business, not for unrelated to the... Yeah.
Local competitor in the garage door business. So
okay.
They do commercial and retail, or in residential. And the owner was checked out. Jesse was running the company or running the business. He wasn't doing the books or anything like that, but he was doing all the estimating. He was actually going out and doing some of the installs on the doors, doing the repairs. He had a lot of industry knowledge. He's been with them for 3 years, and he just wasn't making what he wanted to make. And he knew that he was worth more, but he just wasn't getting the opportunities. And so he reached out to me just asking, he's like, do you know anybody that's looking for a sales guy, looking for somebody, can handle ops? And, I told him I'd keep an eye out. And then 3 days later, here comes this opportunity. I'm like, man, I don't know if the stars are aligning or not, but this opportunity just came up. If you're interested, this is kind of like, it's not a startup. It's been around for 17 years, but you just reached out to me yesterday looking for something. You've already got the skill set for it. So why don't you come on as operator? We'll buy this business and we'll start you out at 60 grand. It's more than what you're making right now. And if this thing goes the way that we're hoping, you'll get a profit share and then eventually increase your salary as the business grows. And so what we did with him is we gave him 5% equity. There were 2 other partners. We did an SBA loan for $250,000, and it was $50,000 working capital. So we went through the SBA, and it was a 15% down payment, 10-year amortization. So that's how we ended up doing the deal. Gave Jesse 5%, and the deal was for every $100,000 the business netted, we would give him a percent increase up to 20%. So,
but per year, $100,000. So if he did 1 year, he generated an extra $100,000 net. You'd give him an additional point of equity right then that he'd keep forever. What if he just kept up to 20%? He's capped permanently there. He could never, no matter what he earns for the business after that.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Plus a 5% bonus. So it was 5% on the net. So if he, if we made, $100,000, he's going to get a $5,000 check at the end of the year, plus another 1% on his equity.
Up to 20%. So from his perspective, he has the opportunity to own 20% of this business, earn his way to owning 20% of this business, and enjoy and indefinitely enjoy 5% of the earnings every year.
Correct. Yep.
Plus salary, obviously. Yep. And being paid better than his current position. And this is essentially the same position, although probably, he'll have a better boss, one hopes.
Yeah, exactly.
You have a better boss. So. Okay, great. And so let's just go back to the numbers on the business again real quick now that we have all of that. Thank you for that detail. $250,000 of SDE. So minus, now Jesse's going to come in for $60,000. Let's just keep off his 5% just to keep things simple. So that's $190 of SDE. And then you said the bookkeeping was going to be probably $30,000 or $40,000. So let's just go to $150 for easy math, roughly. So you're buying a business that could earn for you as owner $150,000 a year for $250,000. So while that's a very small business, 250 SDE, and by the way, that SDE is really going not just paying one person's salary, but 1.5, the owner and his wife's part-time. Very small, but the ROI, the unlevered ROI on this is, call it 150 over 250. So that's 60% unlevered ROI. Now I'm simplifying still because you're probably going to have a J curve and want to reinvest some of those earnings in the business. There's probably a lot to improve, et cetera. But just napkin math, tiny business, but phenomenal. Obviously, basically it was listed for being sold for 1x multiple. Phenomenal ROI. Why was it being listed for so little?
I think because the husband and wife were still working in the business. He was putting in anywhere from 50 to 60 hours a week. Oh. She was putting in 10 to 20. So, he was on the road. He was out there doing the installs. I think the man was in his 70s at the time when we took over. So he's a road warrior. And, we do jobs. We can do jobs up in Boise, Idaho. We'll go all the way down to Miami. We're across the United States.
Oh, wow.
So it was, I think that's the reason why it was priced so low. And being new construction and project based, you don't have he had consistent income, but it was just not reoccurring revenue. So I don't think that he got the multiple that most of these businesses would get if he had reoccurring revenue.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and if he's working as that much, you, just to be conservative, probably want to think about replacing him with 2 people, not 1. Right. So actually, the $150,000 in expenses to replace him and his wife was probably an underestimate. It's probably closer to 200 or more.
Yeah, no, and I would imagine, and that the idea was that I would come in and I would put the systems in place. Eventually, replace his wife that was handling the books. If she did a good job, we were going to leave her in there because she still wanted to have a little bit of spending money to go to the casino, and it sounded fine. We had come up with a rate, and like I said, it was around $35,000 a year, and she was going to give us 6 months to let us get through the transition period. So she was going to work with me and help get that together. But after we got into it, first day was a big eye opener. Jesse was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed because we were on QuickBooks desktop. She had dial-up internet. She had never sent an email in her life. Everything was done through snail mail. I mean, it was just the amount of work that was going to be needed to get us up to date, so I didn't have to drive to their house or wait for the mail to come in to send us our profit and loss for the month. She's a very nice person, but she was just not meant for that position. She did good the way that they operated, but to run an actual business, there was no way that we were going to be able to keep her. So,
well, Mike, let me stop you there. 2 questions. First, what did your diligence on this business look like?
Yeah. So as far as the due diligence, we just we reviewed the bank statements, looked at the tax returns, everything matched up. It's a little different between the cash and an accrual because there's about a 10% retainer that the GCs hold back. So we had to match up to see that money was actually coming in previous years. So, if he did, $2 million in 2018 and they held back $200,000, we would have had to make sure that it was showing up in 2019 because all that money was being held back from it. So,
and so you guys are subs. You work for GCs on almost all your work. Okay.
Yes.
And just to press a little bit, because you're so overwhelmed and by what you find that she doesn't use email as one example. You didn't, in your diligence, push to go see the office or somehow get inside the business. Obviously, you weren't going to do it like you did with your TJ Maxx cleaning company where you could operate it for a while. But is there a learning here? Or was there no way you could have diligenced how she was doing the books?
I don't think we probably could have pressed a little more. As far as seeing the office, there was no office. They worked out of their home. So it was home-based business. And again, we drop ship everything, so there's no inventory. So that made things easy as far as that goes. The equipment that he had, we saw the trucks. There's only a handful of trucks that he had. He had a trailer. There wasn't really much to see as far as equipment.
Yeah.
But if we would have had a better understanding of how she actually operated, that would have been helpful, or at least prepped us whenever we walked in day one.
Well, and was there part of you that on day one, as overwhelmed as you were to discover that, how much work there was ahead of you? Did you not also see that as meat on the bone value that you were going to be able to add and make this into a much more appealing business and profitable, probably efficient business?
That was the idea, that we were going to make this more efficient, and my thought was, she's working 10 hours a week. I could easily go get either a third party to handle the books, or I can get a bookkeeper to work part-time and they can just handle all of it. And then we would just need somebody to manage the lien waivers with the vendors and the GCs. It didn't really seem like a lot. And honestly, it's not, looking back, or what I know now, it's not that difficult. We've got the people in place and they can easily handle it. There's programs like Stateline that can help manage lien waivers. There is technology that you can put into this, and that was the idea on my end, is it's going to be a lot of work up front, and then I can hire myself out or hire somebody to get in this place once we have the cash to be able to hire these people. So it was that was the idea with this. And when the previous owner told us, he said, there's endless amounts of work, and he was still working through COVID. That was good enough for us to pull the trigger.
Yeah. Well, the other thing here to say is that it's such a small business. There's always this tension about buying small versus buying large. Buying small, one's first intuition is that seems less risky because there's just less money at stake. On the other hand, it's generally going to be a more fragile business, maybe a glorified job for the owner. And so it seems like it could likely, the smaller the business, more likely it could just go to zero. Bigger business, on the other hand, intimidating, feels riskier because there's so much more money at stake, but it's more of a robust business and much less likely to go to zero. So there's that tension there. So just kind of leaning on the former, not the latter, where this feels low risk. It kind of is. I mean, it was $250,000 for this business, and you had partners. Can you say more about how everyone's financial contribution to the $250,000, or I guess to the down payment? The SBA loan was for $250,000. So what was your equity injection?
$37,500. So
across you and two partners.
Yes. So it really wasn't, for us, I mean, the attitude was like, look, we know it's small. It sounds like it's got legs on it. Worst case scenario, we all have to, come up with, split $250,000 three ways to go ahead and pay the debt back to the bank. And it didn't really, it seemed like it had more positives than it had negatives. Yeah. And if it was going to fail, then it wasn't going to put us in the hole that much.
Well, I think this is a good example of the logic there. When that risk profile I just gave, the two ways of looking at a small business versus a big business, I'm convinced by your logic here. Worst case scenario, this thing goes to zero, and you guys are each out, whatever, 250 divided by 3-ish. Now, I guess on the other hand, to really get to really analyze this. Yes, that risk is mitigated 250 divided by 3, but it's also your upside is also mitigate or is also a third of what it would otherwise be. So you have less risk, but you also have less reward because you have these partners. Mm-hmm. Anyway, very interesting. But I haven't even mentioned the thing that you've now mentioned twice, which is the strongest signal of all, that there's a lot of work for this business to do. There's a lot. It's at least according to the owner, who's going to be biased in telling you this. He wants to sell you the business. But if we take him at his word, there's a lot of growth to be had here. So you can quickly have a much bigger business and just have this really, really attractively low entry point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Mike, what was your plan in terms of keeping your W-2?
Well, I didn't think the work was going to be that much. I figured maybe 20 hours a week, and I can do that on the side. I didn't mind. I've been accustomed to working 2-3 jobs, since I was 16. So it's just my nature. So I really didn't mind putting the hours in if there was going to be some upside to this. And with the idea that we were going to be able to hire out, I could do this for 6 months to a year and then hire myself out, and we would have somebody operating it. So, I didn't really think that the work was going to be as much as it was, but the problem that we had was we told the owner, beef this business up and take on as many contracts as you possibly can. He did exactly that. So he went from 2.5, his best year that he's ever done, and we did 7.18 the first year in 2021 that we took over. So it was extremely stressful. We didn't understand the cash flow of the business. Working with GCs, you're on, we bill for material on the 25th of every month. So as soon as that material drops, if it drops on the 24th, then, 45 days later after we bill, we're going to get that money. But if it drops on the 1st, it's going to take, we can't bill to the 25th. It's going to take 60 days. Well, we're on a net 30 to a net 60 with most of these vendors. So, whenever you've got a material bill of $800,000, it's a little bit of pressure. And I've got vendors screaming at us, telling us that they're going to cut us off if we don't come up with money. And we didn't realize, if we just had the conversation at the beginning and explained that we weren't able to bill, the material dropped early, so we weren't able to bill, and it's going to take another 15 days. We didn't understand that they were willing to work with us if we just had those conversations early. I was in a few fetal position moments going through that because we had material bills over $1 million that we didn't have the working capital. We didn't have a line of credit established. Ownership group had money, but they didn't have that much money. So we got ourselves into a few pinches in the first year that we took over.
Wait, Mike, let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you talk about materials, so obviously that's the garage door materials, the stuff that you use to do the project. You have your own vendors for those. You buy those on 30-day terms, call it. So for all these, and so you've grown, you've tripled now from 2.5 to 7.18, or almost tripled. Actually, when I said you tripled at the beginning, you more than tripled because I was pegging it to the 9.5 number that I've just spoiled for the audience that you get to the next year in 2023. So that would have been almost quadrupling it. Anyway, so you're growing like crazy. You got to buy all these materials, and then you're not then collecting. Then you get pinched because you owe your vendors after 30 days, but you're not getting paid for 45, maybe 60 days. Very kind of simple cash flow, not simple to belittle it, but kind of classic cash flow problem. And so your vendors are now telling you this becomes so acute that their vendors are now telling you they're going to cut you off. So this is also a classic case of growing so fast is actually can be quite precarious because you get into these cash flow problems. Is that just the nature of what you had to endure, or did you do something wrong that if you had been more experienced, you would have done better?
If we were more experienced, we would have understood that if you miss the 25th, you can't bill to the next month on the 25th. That was a problem that we got into, and we missed a couple billing dates. Again, I was relying on the previous owner's wife to do this, and the communication was just poor between us, and she was frustrated because we were trying to get her to use QuickBooks Online, and she was still mailing out lien waivers, through mail. She didn't know how to, again, I mentioned that she didn't know how to use email, so everything was just delayed. It was slow. So we, that was a huge problem, and not understanding the cash flow. If we would have understood how that worked, we would have had a line of credit day one, because the banks they'll extend a line of credit. I believe it's 80% of the receivables, but we didn't know what we didn't know at the time, and that put us in a huge pinch. Thankfully, we were able to get out of it. We had ended up borrowing money from the ownership group. I think it was
when
probably
you say the ownership group, you mean you and the two other partners?
Correct. Yeah.
So you guys lent more of your own personal cash into the business to get you through.
Yes. Which was a difficult conversation with them because, we're only 6 months into this business, and I'm already asking them for over $100,000 to get us through this period of time. But I knew that money was coming in. So that's how I convinced them. I said, look, we've got 150 to 200 grand that's going to drop. That's going to get us back in the positive. We'll be able to pay this back within 3 to 6 months. If we don't do this, we're going to lose the business. And then we're going to default on our contracts. And this is just, we're going to get sued. And this is going to be a huge problem. So that's the other side of the risk, is if you don't perform, GCs can come after you and they'll end up hiring another sub. And then you got to pay the difference of whatever the sub's going to charge. And typically, if they're coming in the last minute, they're going to charge a premium. So yeah, a lot of risk that we took on that we really didn't understand what we were getting into.
And Mike, so the learnings there would be when you're in a business like this with these kind of unfavorable cash collection cycles, make sure that you bill on your own internal schedule like you need to. Don't let sending out an invoice slip. And by the way, this billing on the 25th thing, is that some sort of industry standard or something, or was that just your own internal date? And why couldn't you just be sending invoices on, say, a rolling basis? Every time materials landed at a GC's project, you just bill them right then.
You had till the 25th to do it, so that's how we do it now. As soon as that material drops, we're billing. But again, we just the person that was operating the books and dealing with the lien waivers, she just wasn't consistent. They didn't really have to worry about it. They missed a billing date. It wasn't a big problem because they had cash that they could float the business with.
Yeah.
With us, since we didn't have that, she was just very lax on this. She really didn't care so much. She didn't have any skin in the game anymore. And so, yeah.
Okay. And say more about the line of credit based on receivables, which you weren't able to take advantage of to get you through this fetal moment, but you now know would have been a possibility. Say more about what that is.
So we're going through this right now because we're trying to get a line increase on our line of credit because we've got a lot of jobs coming up in 25. So typically the bank, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's 80% of the accounts receivable. So if we bill out, $2 million worth of material or whatever, and we got all these jobs lined up, they'll give us 80% of that money on a line of credit. So we were able to get that through the bank, but the problem is it just takes time. They need to collect tax returns. They need to collect all of our information from the ownership group. Some of the owners, since they're silent partners, they've got other businesses. It just took forever to get it done. Obviously, we were all rushing around because time was of the essence, and we had to get it done or we were going to default. So we were able to pull it together. The line of credit really helped us out and got us through the next 2 years because we were still waiting on retainage to come through to use that to grow the business and to pay the employees. But
wait, which line of credit? A different line of credit?
Well, the line of credit that we applied for in the beginning of whenever this all started. So the ownership group, they put their money in to help us get through that period of time to pay the employees. And then the line of credit came through to help take care of the vendors that we needed to pay for the material. So I don't have the exact time frame of when the line of credit went through, but we were able to. The line of credit saved us.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you did get the line of credit, but because it took time as a stopgap, you guys had to put cash in.
Correct. Yeah, we didn't start the line of credit process because I called the bank and I said, look, the owner told us that we only needed $30,000 a month or $30,000 in working capital to operate the company. That was because that was his average payout to the employees. That wasn't to pay for the material. So we didn't know that the way that the cash flow cycle worked as far as billing and then getting payment for the material in 45 to 60 days, we didn't understand that we had to have money sitting on the side to be able to pay this if it took them a little bit longer to go ahead and pay the GC to pay us for the material that was dropped. Mm-hmm. So whenever we started the process, we were already in a pinch. Vendors were already yelling at us. And then we started the process to get the line of credit. So after having several conversations with each one of the vendors, we explained to them, what was going on. We were going to get paid. We billed out on this date. We showed them the contract, showed them the billing, and spoke with the GCs. So they were comfortable with that. And then the line of credit, came through and paid them off.
Gotcha. Okay. And getting a line of credit based on receivables, this isn't factoring. You still receive the money, right?
Correct. Yep.
It's not like the bank takes over those invoices.
No.
A guest who will have aired a number of weeks before this conversation airs, Jonathan Tupper, bought an asset-based lending company, and factoring is one of the things they do. And factoring is basically, selling your invoices.
It's like 60 cents on the dollar or something. We looked into that. Trust me. I mean, we were at that time where we needed to figure something out.
Okay.
But that was going to put us at a further loss. So we couldn't, it wasn't a great option, but it was still an option. But thankfully that line of credit came through and we were able to get through that period of time.
How fetal was this fetal position moment? I mean, how worried did you get? Give us, if you would, a picture into this dark moment.
Yeah, it was pretty miserable. Like I said, my wife, she's from Bogota, Colombia, and we were up in Jersey to visit her brother, and I'm sitting on, we're waiting for the train to come, and I get a call from the previous owner yelling at me saying that we owe $600,000 to one of our vendors or they're going to cut us off. And the communication with his wife wasn't there and we missed the billing date. And he said, this business is going to go under if you don't get your shit together. I mean, he's screaming at me, telling me I'm an idiot. We didn't know what we were doing. And, how dare you be up in a different city when you should be focused on this business? And I had a panic attack right there. I'm sitting there. It's supposed to be a nice, happy time to go visit her brother that I've never met. And it's cold in the winter, sitting there waiting for the train. And I blank face, staring at the sky, like not knowing what the hell to do. So,
wow.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. I'll tell you that. But, I think that's, being an entrepreneur, I think a lot, it takes grit. You got to push through it. Like failure isn't an option. And if it is failure at the end of the day, then like you got to do everything you can to make it hurt less than what it would. Mm-hmm. So I got on the phone, started calling banks, explained the situation, what was happening. And that's when we started the line of credit process. But yeah, it was a stressful time. And thankfully my wife, she's been there for me throughout this whole process and talked me off a ledge. And it's been good. It's nice to have somebody by your side to get you through the hard times.
Well, and just to add insult to injury, the fact that the owner is calling you and yelling at you when really this is kind of due to an oversight of his wife's, right?
Yeah.
We clear on that? Okay.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's another story with her. We were kind of held hostage to keep her around because we really needed the previous owner to train Jesse. But her attitude was, if she's not working in the business, neither is he. So we had to keep her on for almost a year and a half. And probably about a year, dealing with this, the books being screwed up. None of it made sense. We didn't know what the hell we were making on the jobs. She couldn't do job cost accounting, let alone, use an email to send me over, the lien waivers that we needed to get out. So it was a challenging time. We ended up getting through it, but yeah. So, you could put the blame on her, but at the end of the day, we should have known what we were doing and we should have cut ties with her from the get-go.
Yeah. And Mike, say just a little bit more about your partners, the partnership group, you and two others, the two others. Can you share what that split looks like, what the division of responsibilities looks like?
So, the idea, like I mentioned in the beginning, this was supposed to be an investment. And I told them that I would get my hands dirty and I'd get the system set up in the back. And I would keep track of my hours. And then here was my hourly, pay. And so that was the idea behind it. And they were going to remain silent partners. This was purely an investment for them. And it still is to this day. We've got a weekly phone call that we do with the investment group just to update them on what contracts are coming through and how profitable we are in the jobs. But they all, both of them run separate companies and several companies. So that was the idea from the get-go, is they would remain silent partners. And then eventually, once I got the system set up, that would be the same thing for me. And then if I had to stay in the business, I would end up taking a small salary. But in the beginning, we didn't have the money. So I wasn't taking any money from the business. I just kept track of my hours and I'd get a payday at the end of the year if there's any profit left over.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever get compensated for that?
I did.
Okay. All right. So they're going to be pretty passive or almost totally passive other than this phone call. And you are working toward that. But in the meantime, whatever you have to do in the business, you'll be compensated for on an hourly basis. And then I guess you said there was also a stipulation that if you couldn't become fully passive, it would settle out at some salary for you.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So let's keep hearing how things have gone. So you were growing like crazy. Reason for this cash flow crunch. That was, I think you said 7.18. Did you say in 22?
Yes, 21, 7.18.
Okay.
Because we bought it in November. We bought it in November 2020.
Okay. So going like gangbusters, and then what happens in 22?
22 was the same thing. We did 7.75. We had gotten rid of the previous owner's wife from handling the books. We brought somebody in from the competitor, same place that Jesse came from. She was unhappy with the owner and how he treated the employees. She wanted something that she could work from home from, a little bit part-time. So she came on. She was fantastic. We ended up working with our CPA firm and her to get the books in order because the books were so screwed up. So she really got us to a place where I didn't have to deal with the billing. I didn't have to deal with the lien waivers. I didn't have to deal with any of that. It was still, we didn't have a system in place at the time, so it was still not perfect. And later on in 21, we ended up bringing a consultant in. It was a friend of mine. She had ran her father's GC company for 15 years. So she came in and helped us create a process, create, systems. And by the time we finished up, it was probably about a 2-month stint with her. By the time we finished up, she's like, what are you going to do for this position? Because you're still working a 9 to 5 and there's still a lot of work to be done. And I said, well, are you looking, what are you doing right now? She's like, well, I'm not working, but I've got 2 kids at home and, I'd be willing to put in, part-time or even possibly full-time if you guys can handle it. And, we ended up hiring her and, started out at like a competitive wage, but the promise was that she could work from home. I didn't care when she worked, as long as she was available. If she needed to take her kids to school, she needed to pick them up, do anything, doctor's visits, we don't care. You got unlimited PTO. You can work anywhere in the world. You don't have an office. I give you health insurance. So she came on and she replaced me. She does it 10 times better than I would do it. Having that general
and she's
contract.
doing admin, back office, everything that's not, all everything. Of that. Basically running the company stuff that's not the crews themselves, not the projects themselves.
Correct.
Out in the field. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now it's, my hours went down from probably 20, 30 hours a week to 5 hours a week, and most of the time less. So she handles the majority of the meetings. She provides updates on the contracts. She's dealing with the licenses that we have to get. She deals with all the lien waivers and coordinates everything with the bookkeeper that's handling the stuff for us. She's dealing with Jesse. She helped him organize things. We got a project manager that's underneath him right now. Any of the phone calls that we get, we're dealing with laborers that are on the road 95% of the time. So it's a special type of person that's willing to do this. And it typically comes along with, drug, alcohol problems, family issues and stuff. So I used to get all those phone calls. I don't get any of those phone calls anymore. So she took everything off my plate. She's phenomenal. We ended up getting an office admin. The office admin was her sister, and she had worked with her father's company as well. So she was well-versed in the contracting world. So, right now she is helping with the schedules because most of these guys are either staying in hotels or Airbnbs. She goes through our credit card expenses to make sure that the guys aren't overspending. We've got a team in place now. And again, it's taken everything off my plate. I typically make the bigger decisions if we get into a pinch. Jobs are overlapping. Do we sub? Do we try to do this ourselves? If we're subbing, she'll make phone calls out to all the subcontractors in the local area to be able to do this. She's phenomenal. She really changed the business for us.
And what is her title? Is she kind of COO?
You could call her COO, Director of Operations.
But Jesse reports to you and she reports to you. So they're
Jesse reports to her now.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Fallon, she feeds me, any information that I needed to know. I've got a few things that I want to know on a regular basis or on a weekly basis, where we're at, when the jobs are going to be completed, what do we have coming down the pipe? Jesse feeds all this information to her. They have separate meetings and they review all this stuff just to make sure that we're staying on track, make sure that the licenses are coming through so that we can actually perform on these jobs. It's everything. Right now, I just kind of handle the finances and we do projections. I work with a bookkeeper to do forecasting to see what the next year is going to look like, which is a little difficult in the new construction world because since it's project-based, it's hard to gauge, but we know how many contracts have been bid. We know where we're having final conversations, and then we know what's been won. And then I report all that. She holds a meeting for the investor meeting on Tuesdays, and she presents all that information. So she'll either run the meeting or I'll run it myself and just give them a quick update. And so it's really, she's really taking everything off my plate and just turn this into a business. We're a small, lean, mean team. But the fact that, they can work anywhere, they can take vacation anytime they want, as long as they're getting done what they need to do. I don't care if they're working 20 hours or 10 hours, we still pay them the same. So the company's doing well enough to be able to do that, and the flexibility in their schedules, in my opinion, that's what's keeping them around.
Keeping her around.
Keeping the team around. I mean,
Everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice. They all get paid well. They get paid what they have, get paid sitting in an office. And with the flexibility like that, like you can't find that at most companies.
Mike, some follow-ups on what I want to get into now is a little bit of the kind of the business itself and its appeal or not. I heard you just talk about how in project-based land, it can be a little bit different, a little bit difficult to make projections. And typically we are told that construction businesses are, project-based work, unappealing, very cyclical, unfavorable cash collection dynamics, as we've already talked about, and hard to predict the from year to year how the business will go, tied to the economy, et cetera, tied to construction. However, one thing that Sam Rosati recently said to me, he's in the commercial fencing business and did a roll up there and just partnered with private equity, big success, is that in project-based construction, one of the appealing characteristics of it is that you actually can see pretty, 6 months into the future, or you can get a pretty good sense of what your revenue looks like for the next 6 months, because that's how long it takes to bid and win a job. Maybe it's not 6 months. I don't remember what the figure was, but you have some more visibility into revenue than, maybe a home services business that's for consumers. And while you get paid immediately when you have your plumber dispatched to unclog a toilet, you really don't know what your revenue is going to be 6 months from now. Although you can look at historicals, of course. But in your case, you actually have a pretty tight handle on, I think, the next few months of revenue. 6 months?
6 months.
Is that fair?
For sure.
Can you react to that?
Yeah. I mean, right now we can, we know for 2025, we already have 4 million on the books. And we've got probably another 4 or 5 that have already been bid out, and we're having final conversations. So, when somebody asks us, like, what do you project to make, next year? I mean, the ownership team's asking this all the time. And I got to tell them, I'm like, well, right now we got 4 million on the books. These jobs can be pushed up or pushed back because it just depends on when the GC's ready for us. We've already bid out X amount of dollars. We've got an 80% chance to win this. It always could fall apart at the end, but we're always bidding. And, and based on our availability, like if it falls when a project is starting, we always have the opportunity to sub the job out and just manage it. So 6 months is realistic for us, but the problem with these and working with the GCs is that these jobs can get pushed up or they can get pushed back. So like in 2023, we did 9.52 million in revenue. So huge year for us. But then this year to date, we're at 3.34. So a huge drop off, but we knew this going into 2024 because in election years, for whatever reason, there's always a slowdown. And that information came from the previous owner. Said, if you plan on doing what you did last year, he said, it's probably going to be cut in half. So we still are profitable, well, barely profitable at that number. But, we knew this was coming. And since we paid the business off, as long as the employees are paid, for us, I really don't care. Obviously, I want to be making profit. We're not running this business to make nothing. But, if we've got to suffer for 1 year and not make any money, like it's not a big deal for us.
A few things to say. So I feel like your exciting roller coaster from 2023 to this year, you said how much in 23, the revenue?
9.52.
9.52, $9.5 million. And just a reminder to everybody that this was from a business that had never done more than 2.5 million in its very best year. So that's where, you almost have quadrupled it. Okay, but nine and a half last year, and now you're looking at 4 this year. So it's dropped by more than half. But you just explained why you're comfortable with that. But that is perfect example of why construction revenue can be not appealing. These swings from year to year. So Exhibit A on that. But also Exhibit A on the fact that you knew going into this year, your seller told you you're going to have a bad year. It's probably going to be dropped by half. He was remarkably close in his prediction. Mm-hmm. And you had that visibility even as 23 ended, looking forward in 24. So you do have this luxury, if you will, of visibility of revenue in the construction world. I'm harping on this, Mike, because this is news to me. All I'd ever heard was complaints about quality of revenue in construction businesses, but this strikes me as a pretty powerful feature of this. And now looking forward into 2025, you have a really good sense of, you can calculate to within a pretty reasonable margin of error where you're going to land.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of that information comes from the GCs. We've got tight relationships with a handful of them, and we've developed relationships with the project managers and supers. So, they're telling us what's coming down the pipe and telling us what they're expecting, and if it's affecting them, it's affecting us. So, one way around it this year that we were able to not have any gaps in the schedule is we filled it with install. So we were the subs for subcontractors. So we just provided installation work for them. We also are a distributor for a handful of doors. So we still bring in some money through that. But we were able to get through the year and, still have a little bit of profit to share at the end of the year. But, it's not, I know with project-based companies, it's a challenge. And again, we've experienced it, jobs get pushed up, they get pushed back. It's just being able to be flexible. And since we've got, a small team, we're able to do that. The one thing that we don't want is these guys to be sitting around. So we approach this year with the attitude that if we got in a pinch and we had a month or a 2-month gap, we were willing to cut their hours down, but still pay them to sit. Obviously, we would put them in training or we would do something so that they're not just sitting around getting paid. But we had enough margin in the jobs that we did to be able to allow that to happen. Because if they sit, they're going to go find something else.
Anything more? I did want to just ask you directly about quality of revenue. Have we covered it? Well, and let me frame the question with this. So, a separate interview that will have aired a few weeks before you is with Jordan Dubin, who's rolling up garage door businesses around the country. And they've moved very quickly, and they've acquired a lot of EBITDA in a very short amount of time. But they're very strict in their criteria around the revenue mix, and they'll only look at garage door businesses that are doing less than 10% of install work. And fully 90% or more needs to be service because of quality of revenue and because of whomever might want to acquire them in the future. They're going to have a similar, very high standard. So react to that. Do you wish you were doing more service? Is it something you're trying to shift that revenue mix to do more service? Or are you guys a construction company and you're at home with that?
I'm fine with how the business is doing. If we do in between 7 and 9 million, that's fine with us. Would say it's a lifestyle. I mean, it is kind of a lifestyle business for the ownership group. But the opportunities for growth, we can we can take on, we've already looked at a handful of service-based companies, and it'd be an easy add-on because the new construction business would be a feeder to the service business. And we really don't want to get into residential because just specifically in St. Louis, there's a lot of competition. You have a lot of chuck and a trucks that are willing to, they put up a website and they've got it's a one-man band that can go out there and knock out a garage door at half the price that you can because they don't have the overhead. We don't really want to get into the residential side, but if we were going to acquire something else, I would want something that's heavy on commercial repairs or commercial service. Because as we are doing these new construction projects and having relationships with the GCs and the ownership group, we could be selling service contracts at the same time.
Yeah.
And that is where the money's at. So if we were to go do a roll up where we're going to buy, acquired additional companies, that's the route that we would probably go.
So you do feel that the money in this industry is in contracts, service, and specifically commercial?
I would say that if you're looking at a subcontractor business, margins are lower than what most subcontractors make. but the service, from what I've understood with my operator, he said from day one, if we're going to take this anywhere, we need to be doing commercial service.
Okay.
Yep.
You mentioned the loan, the SBA loan that you'd paid it off, I think. Did you?
Yeah, we did.
Can you say more about that? That was quick.
Yeah. So I believe we paid it off in either late 22 or 23. We were knocking down the loan. We had the SBA and we had the line of credit. So I think at the time we had enough cash flow coming in to just go ahead and pay it off. It might not have been the best decision because we were using the line more, but with the SBA,
you paid it off with the line of credit.
Well, we had cash, but that meant that we're relying upon the line of credit because it ate up all of our cash.
Right.
We were relying upon the line of credit, but whenever we, I don't remember what the term is with the bank, but as while we're using this line, if we have cash in the bank, then they're just going to go ahead and move the cash to pay off the line. So it was going to reduce the amount of interest that we were paying on the loan or, on the line of credit. So it just seemed like it would make sense. And, all three of us had properties that were tied up with the SBA. So if the business would default or whatever, they would go snatch up the properties. So we wanted to get our rentals freed up. So that was the reason why we made the decision to do it. We could have stretched this out over 10 years and paid a low interest rate on it. But we just wanted, at the time, some of us personal situations, we just wanted our properties freed up.
All right, Mike. Well, so just to level set us for where the business is at here, we're the day after Thanksgiving, so coming in toward the end of 2024, you'll have a light year this year in the $4-ish million range. That's down from $9.5 million in 23, but it looks like you're going to get back to in that range in 25. So you have let's call it a $9 million business. That could swing, but let's average what you're projecting for 25, 20, and then 24 and 23. So what is that? 9 plus 9.5 is 18.5 for 22.5. So call it 7 million is the average revenue. Grown from 2.5 million when you bought it in 2020. So you've almost tripled the business. And again, I'm being ungenerous because I'm using this low year as part of that average.
Yeah.
Almost triple the business. But you also have this team. You got Jesse, an operator who's now got a lot of experience in this business. You have the woman who has taken over duties for you. You, Mike, are working 5 hours a week. Your loan is paid off. What are margins in this business? If his best year was 2.5 million and he was doing 250 in SDE, 2.5 million in revenue, 250,000 of SDE, 10%ish. What do margins look like?
We
under your
operate.
ownership?
I mean, with the overhead that we have now. Again, whenever he was bidding all these jobs, so it sounds great to go do 7.75 or 7.18 and 21, but we weren't making anything because he was bidding these jobs with the overhead that he was operating at previously. So at the end of these years that we're doing this, we were making 2%. 1% net. Jesse took over the bidding process, and the previous owner didn't feel that he could get any more for the work that he was performing, but we were actually able to double, if not more, and double the gross profit margin. So we were able to get a lot more money for the work that we were doing because he was just the lowest bidder on half these projects. So whenever we changed that, it started to reflect at the end of 22, and then in 23, Jesse had been handling all the bids that he had done in 2022. So we operate currently on every single project. Our net is around 9%.
Mm-hmm.
So
your
sometimes
net from the whole business. So your net income margin at the end of everything, 9%. Yes. Wow. So like next year, 9% on $9 million is $810,000.
Yes.
Phenomenal. Okay. And in a business that you are, by the way, did you ever quit your W-2?
I did, but I quit whenever I took over the pool companies that we bought in May last year.
May of 23.
Yeah. So I was working, double dipping and working, a job and running a business on the side and still flipping houses. So, yeah, it's chaotic. Right.
We're going to hear about the pool for just a minute here as we wrap up. Point is, do you feel validated in going down this path? $800,000 coming off a business that you work 5 hours in. Now, granted, you have to split that 800 across three partners. So, but even still, that's going to be 250 for you if we're doing it basically at a third. No debt on the business, paid off the debt. I mean, seems, and let's not forget your entry point into this business. You said what was it? 36.5, 37.5 was the equity.
I think I put in 12.5.
You put in personally 12.5 to be generating now somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 a year.
Yes.
So is that as happy as it sounds? You're not smiling.
No, I mean, I am. I mean, it's been great. I think, the three-way split, I think it worked out. I've got, there was my tuition paid, and I'm happy with
tuition paid, meaning you're, like learning to be a small business operator. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I've been through the headaches. I've been through the fetal position moments. I know how to deal with the stress now. It was hard, dealing with that, my wife, and she experienced a lot of these things. It caused family problems and stuff, but, I can deal with it. And, I'm running 3 companies right now. So obviously I can handle the pressure. The way that things are cut up at the moment, I don't think that if it was today and I was going to look at this company, I don't think that I would bring in partners, especially with the low down payment needed for it. But especially since they're silent partners. But at the time, it was necessary, and the way the operating agreement was written, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking forward, if I was going to do this again, the split would be different.
Yeah. Right, because you put in whatever you said 12 and a half, right? And have a third of those profits, whereas you could have put in 3 times 37.5 and had fully 800,000 coming out of the business. And obviously, in our world, a lot of self-funded searchers use equity. Take investor equity, and then don't have full ownership of the business. But typically, that's when they're really going to need more money. This was such a small business, you probably could have found that 37.5 yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had the cash to do it myself. It's just, whenever you've never done this before, and having people that are, already own businesses that are experienced and have a lifeline you can call, you spread the risk a little bit. It just feels better. Even if they're silent partners for whatever reason, it just still feels better that you got somebody that you can call at any time of the day to talk to about it.
Yeah. And also in that moment of that cash flow crunch that you had, you were able to spread out the infusion across the 3 of you. Otherwise, if you'd been the sole owner, you would have had to bring all the money, all that stopgap money yourself, which would have been pretty burdensome. Okay. And how old are you, Mike?
I'm 39.
39. Great. Any takeaways that we haven't given attention to? Any learnings from this adventure? We've talked about so many of them, but any that you want to articulate explicitly here?
Understanding the cash flow is the biggest thing. I mean, if you don't, I've heard some of your other guests, I can't remember the guy's name, but I think that he got into a cash flow crunch and, wasn't able to get out of it. But understanding, how the cash flow operates in the business is number one. Getting that line of credit day one. I mean, you have to have it, even if you don't need the money. I mean, these 2 other businesses, we don't need the cash, but I've taken out as much as I possibly can on the line of credit in case we get into a pinch. Things happen. You never know what's going to happen. Getting key man insurance in case the worst thing does happen, to cover yourself. Because if something would happen, Jesse, it would be a problem, but we would be able to pivot to, the team would be able to handle it, but we would be able to pivot to a subcontracting model. So it wouldn't, kill the business, but, just having these things up front and, understanding how to, to do the due diligence better than we did. would have been, those are the takeaways that I would say that are needed. And small businesses, sometimes they're small because the owner wants them to be small. They don't really care for growth. They don't have any ambitions to get any bigger. So I wouldn't look past them. These other two companies that we acquired, they've got a ton of growth potential. We bought them obviously at higher multiples and higher price, but there are some gems out there that all they really need is just somebody that's willing to put in the work and put systems in place, and something that the previous ownership never did.
Mm-hmm. And the systems you put in place have been successful. So starting to use email would be one right. system, and getting on QuickBooks. Anything else? Any other systems to talk about? You mentioned the loan waiver stuff the lien waiver. There's a SaaS product for that.
Yeah, Stateline. It's pretty fantastic. The amount of hours that were getting put on the bookkeeper was more than what she wanted. So this technology was able to help streamline some of the lien waivers that were getting sent out. People are people, and they're not, you send an email out, they might get busy, swamped, and they just look past it. And for us, time is everything. So, she didn't have to continually send emails out to get these lien waivers signed from them. So it's really cut her hours probably by 10 hours a week, just not having to deal with the stuff. So that was huge. The bidding platforms, there's more, I square foot. It's free to an extent. And then we got another bidding platform just to be able to get access to all these jobs. So we do have technology in place now. I'm sure there's more that we could implement, but for right now, we're good with what we've got.
And when you talk about implementing systems, this is mostly what you mean.
Yeah, I don't really, outside of we have a project manager that's in training right now. So that's the next step for us, is to take off some of the work off Jesse's plate. And then once that's done, if we're going to get any bigger than 9 million, 10 million a year, we're going to have to bring in, additional crews and probably explore that subcontracting model more.
Mm-hmm. The subcontracting model where you guys actually sub yourselves.
Yeah, we would sub out the labor, and then we would fly in a foreman to oversee. So whether that's just flying in once a week, or he would just stay on the job to make sure that they're doing it according to our standards. We've been successful with that. So it's an option, but it also takes away work from the installers that we have in our crews. Mm-hmm.
I think one other thing to call out, we did at the top, but just to reiterate, is the value of having Jesse. So when this deal came along, you had an operator that you trusted because he was a friend, who had the exact necessary experience to be applied as operator of this business. So that, as you put it, that was an alignment of the stars. I'm not sure there's a lesson there other than to point out that there was some good fortune here.
I would say the lesson there is that if you've got somebody on salary, it's easy for them to walk away. But if you've got the equity piece tied in, the 5% with the potential to earn more, that was, I wouldn't say the hook, but that's what kept him around when things got tough.
Yeah.
So, like, hey, you're making this, but, look at the potential. If we bid these jobs correctly, you could be walking away with a 5% bonus. And when you get your full equity stake in the company, 20% of the profits, you could easily be making $300,000 a year. So for somebody that wasn't making more than 60, and that's the potential now, that's why he's here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it was $100,000 of extra earnings, additional earnings that he earned. He got another percentage point of the business. What is that number up to now? What is his ownership up to?
I think he's over 15% now.
Over 15%. Good. That's great. Good for him. What about, you had said to me that you hear all these people, or you hear a lot of people on the podcast, and you have some communication with the Washington University, where there's an ETA course, or a course or program. Yeah. And so anyway, you're exposed to MBAs who are doing ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, and the models and the technical speak of EBITDA and so on. And you don't come from that background. React to what is your reaction when you see some of those folks approaching this from a guy who doesn't come from that background and has been successful over these last 4-ish years doing it?
It's speaking the language. I definitely feel incompetent sometimes when I'm talking to these guys because they rattle off EBITDA, STE, all these acronyms, and it's like, and I'm not scared to say, look, what do you mean by that, or what does that stand for? So it's just they have all the experience, the knowledge that they're gaining from these universities that are teaching them ETA and teaching them how to go about raising money, talking to private equity firms, whether they're going to do their own search or they're going to join up with the private equity. I've met with a handful of private equity companies, and just when I talk to these guys, I definitely feel like that I don't have the vocabulary to communicate with them on the level, but I don't have. I'm not nervous, or I'm not. I'm more than willing to just go ahead and say, look, like I don't understand what the hell you're talking about. Like, can you break it down to me like I'm a 5-year-old? And several of them said, whether you are going to do this on your own or you're going to join up with a PE down the road, like, you got the grit, you've got the determination to go ahead and get after it. That's the kind of person that we're looking for. It doesn't matter if you graduated from Harvard or WashU or whatever it's going to be. These kids that are getting out thinking that they're going to go conquer the world, like, they definitely can because they've got the education behind it, but they don't have the experience. And I feel like that gives me a leg up over these kids that are getting out because, yes, you've got a prestigious university behind you, but, I've got the experience behind me. And so it does feel a little weird, networking with some of these guys, but, it's been nice because they're reaching out to me, asking me questions. How did you go about doing it? And I think the one thing that stands out between myself and them is just experience and willing to stick it through when things get bad. What's the oh shit scenario look like? And are you willing to deal with that pressure and the problems that come up from it?
Mike, take us home by telling us about this latest acquisition or latest acquisitions.
So May 2023, we acquired Pool King Recreation, which has been around for 42 years, and Florida Pool and Spa, not in Florida. They're based out of Maryland Heights. Previous owner called it Florida Pool because he had a partner that was from Florida. Not the best for SEO, but it works out. So we closed on Pool King May 1st, and we closed on Florida Pool May 26th. So 2 transitions at the same time, chaotic, hectic, still running another company. But we've had a lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges, but it's been great. They did have the team in place, which was very different. They had the technology. Pool King obviously had, they were still dated with a lot of the ways that they did, they ran their leads. So we've changed a lot of things, and we are still in the process of improving systems. But it's been going good. It's different. I'm more involved with Pool King I'm doing a lot of general manager type. That's kind of the role that I am here. Florida Pool is the team's running. We've moved around a lot of people. We had to let a few people go, but we have a good team in place right now. And if I wanted, I could probably spend 2 hours a week there, maybe less, but we're in growth mode. So, 7:00 in the morning, I'm up at Florida, and then, around 8-9 o'clock, I'm over at Pool King. And it's been a busy year, or busy, 19 months.
And what is the combined revenue of those 2 pool businesses?
Pool King is sitting around $5 million a year, and Florida Pool we're going to hit 1.4. So his best year with Florida Pool was probably about 1.2. So we've grown that company. Pool King, we bought it post-COVID, so there was an enormous drop-off from the revenue. They were probably doing over 6. So we dropped about $1 million in revenue. So it's been a bit of a challenge to see that drop off. We knew it was coming. We bought the company at like a 2x. With revenue right now, it's about a 4x that we paid for it. And then Florida Pool, we paid a 4x on that. So it's been good. But yeah, Pool King, to see what the company looks like post-COVID has been stressful. but there's a lot of things that we can change as far as the systems and efficiencies to get us back up to where they were.
And did you buy these businesses with an SBA loan and partners?
So the gentleman that I mentioned that owned 150 businesses, they had this deal under contract. The operator that was going to come in, he had some family issues that he couldn't execute on the deal. And so the deal was going to fall apart. And I had mentioned that I was out looking. Him and I had a conversation and just said that, look, I'm ready to take the next step. I want to get a little bit more management experience. I don't really have much of a role at Stateline anymore outside of just making bigger decisions. So I was ready for it. And we made that decision probably February 2023. And we ended up paying cash for both the deals just to be able to close before the busy season started. We wanted to catch all the upside. So we paid cash, and it's a 49-51 split. So I have minority ownership in it. And we refinanced after we closed on the deal. It took probably about 3-4 months to get the refinance done. But went conventional with the refi. We have a 7-year loan on both the businesses. We kept them separate. I know some people would disagree with that because one's service-based and the other one is retail. So they feed a lot of business to each other, and it would make my life easier if we brought them together. But the attitude is that we want to keep them separate because if one business fails, it's not going to drag the other one down. So there is potential down the road to go ahead and put these two together once we're comfortable with that. But they're both performing really well separately. And so it's been, I'm trying to think of anything else with the deal.
So your partner, who is the gentleman with 150 businesses, presumably has done well for himself. So you guys bought these two businesses in cash, his cash, and then just so you get the deals done, and then promptly refinance them with conventional debt, not SBA debt. Yes. And how much did he take out, or you guys take out when you did
20%. Yeah. So
how much?
To do the 20%.
You took out. Okay, gotcha. No, you took out 80% and left 20% in.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Right. Okay. Great. And then the split is 49-51.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gotcha. And what's your plan with those?
There's been.
are you building a holdco here, Mike, or buy and hold, or what?
It wasn't really the intention. It's a buy and hold. My partner, he likes to keep businesses. He doesn't like to just flip them. It's always a potential that we could do it, but with the number of companies that have approached us to purchase them, there's a lot of baby boomers that are getting out of the business. Private equity doesn't typically like the retail side, so since we're already doing this, and if we were able to cover more territory in the St. Louis market and over in Illinois, there's definitely a lot of potential there. Again, I've already had several conversations with a handful of companies that would like us to take over. They've seen what we've done with the companies, and it's a small community here. They all talk. So there's a lot of positive. There's a lot of positives that they've communicated to these other companies that they thought that we would be a good fit. So it's just a matter of time to take them down and having the right price in mind. So, doing a roll up would be great. Taking on some new pool routes with the service company, we can expand organically. We've got a handful of product lines that we could add to Pool King. So, organic growth, acquisitions when the time's right. But the pool industry, it's an easier business to understand. If I had to go out there and I had to learn all this stuff and do it myself in case something happened, it would be easier for me to do this than the garage door business. So I see more potential there in the fact that there are several companies identical to us that we could acquire. It just seems like there's more legs on this than what the garage door business has at the moment.
Great, Mike. Anything else to add about your story? Anything we didn't talk about?
We could probably do another podcast on the pool companies because there's plenty to tell there. But,
yeah.
I think a lot of people get hung up on the equity splits and stuff. And, for me, since I didn't really come from this background and I didn't have the ETA education on it, I feel like I'm paying my tuition right now. So sometimes if the deal isn't perfect, my attitude with these companies is that if I can grow them, hire myself out, and then go do it again in a more favorable deal and have majority ownership, I mean, that's my path, and that's what I'm planning on doing. So sometimes the deals, maybe they don't pencil out, perfect, but you got to do what works for you. And this has worked for me pretty well. And, I don't have a holdco set up, but this is, it's that's kind of the direction that it's going.
But all this you feel like you're paying tuition. Is that to say that you're not psyched about the 49-51 split?
Oh, I am. I mean, it's great. At the end of the day, with the money that this company's making, I'll be, between the three companies, I'll be pushing close to $1 million a year once these are all paid off. But, so it is great. Having minority ownership just is a little uneasy at times because, if the majority owner wasn't happy with the way that I was performing, I could be fired. We could sell the business. I don't have any say so in what goes on. Obviously, they want to keep me around because I'm running the companies. I got the respect of the employees, but I'm dispensable at the end of the day. So majority ownership and whatever is coming down the line is the direction that I want to go.
Yeah. Makes sense. Mike, if people want to reach out with any questions, how can they do that?
LinkedIn. So I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. Like I said, I've been talking to some of the WashU students. I've had a handful of people reach out just to, hear what I've been through. I think the advice that I can give to anybody that is going to reach out is, you got to do it at some point. You can overanalyze something to death and never do the deal. Sometimes you just, if it looks like it makes sense, just pull the trigger and do it. And, it's never going to be perfect. I mean, like I said, with the pool companies, there are an endless amount of things that we missed in the due diligence, but we've been able to work it out and get through the problems. So, sometimes you just gotta do it.
Great note to end on. Mike Heath, thanks for your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.